Hello. A few days ago, I got a comment under my last video in which one of my subscribers asked me why I seemed to have missed a video. I hadn't done my usual upload, and indeed I hadn't. And there's a good reason for that. And it's this. I have to do research for most of my videos. I don't just sit down and spout stuff off the top of my head. I check facts, I check backgrounds, that sort of thing. And when you do that, you get a whole load of incidental stuff that doesn't come up in the video, but you've unearthed it. And it means I am exposed to a lot of other information. It's not as if I just sit down at the internet and just look for one or two things. I get a spectrum. And sometimes the sheer weight, the sheer weight of boneheaded stupidity coming out of the human race, it just depresses me, and I find myself unable to chat on the video. It's just too heartbreaking to see what people can become. Well, anyway, this actually, I'm going to play you a little bit of a clip of a video, which is not something I unearthed last week. It's a video, it started off a video which I meant to do weeks ago, but then, well, a whole load of human stupidity got in the way. I make clothes. I used to make all my own clothes. I make much less now, but I'm still fairly handy with a sewing machine. And because I have an interest in making clothes, I occasionally look at videos that have to do with dressmaking. And because of that, the algorithm throws up the occasional dressmaking video. Oh, which reminds me, of course, that proves that the algorithm does actually have an effect on what you get to see. So please hit the like button, subscribe and share my video, because sometimes I know some of them are getting buried, sort of shunted into the sidings. And I'm getting people saying that they made comments underneath my videos and the comments didn't appear. So it looks like sometimes I'm saying stuff that's controversial enough for YouTube to suppress it in some way. So I appreciate your help countering that. Anyway, here is this video that I was talking about.
Over the last few weeks, as this new awareness of racism in our culture has been playing out, there have been many historical costumers who've been asking difficult questions about our hobby and where this fits in a more inclusive world. How do we even do this anymore when we've been so busy happily admiring the pretties and reenacting the experience of all these wealthy white people running around looking fabulous, that we've kind of sometimes been ignoring the dark history that comes behind that. Where did these fabrics come from? Where did the money come from that paid for these dresses? And that's a very uncomfortable thing to face.
Oh, that's a good place to stop it. Just look at it. She's almost in tears. And the general tone of the rest of the video is her crying about the peacock dress. Now, let me explain what the peacock dress is before we go any further. Where's the picture? Well, here we are. This is a Wikipedia entry about the peacock dress. Lady Curzon's peacock dress was a gown made of gold and silver thread, designed by Jean-Philippe Worth for Mary Curzon, Baroness Curzon of Kedleston, to celebrate the 1902 coronation of King Edward VII and Queen Alexandra. Now, the king and queen actually did not turn up at the Delhi Durbar, which the Curzons held in 1903, but it was a very splendid occasion. And she had this dress made for that occasion. Now, this lady here, she considered the possibility, and for all I know she's still doing it, of actually making a reproduction of this dress. She thought she'd make a copy of it. And in researching for the copy, she suddenly got gripped by this feeling that it was a symbol of imperial racism. First of all, this is what the dress was made of. It was made of chiffon, and remember, this is just the overgarment. It's made of chiffon, and the embroidery, I'll try and get a close-up. If I can find a close-up of the design, I'll put it up here. It's embroidered with gold wire. It was it's called zardozi, a special way of weaving gold wire. And it must have, you could imagine in the sunlight, it must have been an absolutely splendid sight. But this is only the chiffon overdress. And underneath that dress because chiffon's see-through, would have had to have been a couple of layers of linen. And then, as you can see, despite the fact that the lady will have quite a slim waist, she is wearing a very severe corset because there will be no give in this material. And so she will have to have something that would prevent her from ripping the material by breathing. Furthermore, the dress, I suppose the train was in addition. The dress itself weighed 10 pounds, which is quite a weight, and then all the other stuff on top of it. The Durbar was held in January in Delhi. The temperature in January in Delhi is in the 20s in centigrade. So, pretty warm. And despite the fact that her shoulders are bare, the rest of her from here on down is encased basically in gold wire. She is wearing a full metal jacket. And then underneath this external chain mail thing she's wearing, made out of gold, there will be, as I said, layers of linen and then all the corsetry. Furthermore, chiffon embroidered with wire would not feel very nice to the touch. It would be quite rough, and there's always going to be little bits that would catch on stuff. So you'd have to be, even on itself, so you'd have to be very careful how you moved. And since chiffon is very light and easily split, and gold wire is very tough, then she'd have to be really careful about not snagging her dress on anything. So every single move she made would have had to have been calculated. As her hands touched the dress, she would have felt the roughness of it. And then it was very hot. Well, relatively hot. It wasn't a comfortable dress. Why do you think this woman was wearing such an uncomfortable dress? Well, what you'd have to do is look at what happened at the Durbar itself. Here, it says here, Mass dignitaries by train from Bombay, and Curzon came from Calcutta. The assembly awaited them, displayed possibly the greatest collection of jewels to be seen in one place. Each of the Indian princes was adorned with the most spectacular of his gems from the collections of centuries. Maharajas came with great retinues from all over India, many of them meeting for the first time, while the massed ranks of the Indian armies restrained the crowds of common people. On the first day, the Curzons entered the area of festivities. They came in a howdah on an elephant, together with the Maharajas, riding on elephants, some with huge gold candelabra stuck on their tusks. Now, we're talking about the Maharajas here. And they say gold candelabra, not golden candelabra. They were solid gold. And they were adorning the tusks of their elephants during the day. So that had absolutely no function whatsoever beyond showing that you could afford candelabra made of gold. And I'm going to put some photographs up here of various Maharajas and what they wore. You have to understand, the Raj was governing by consent. The British didn't just march in on India and take over the place. At the peak of British power in India, there were 20,000 soldiers there. That was all. To control 300 million people, which was the Indian population, that just was not possible if it had just been the British marching in on everybody. No, they were governing with the consent of the various states governed by various Maharajas. And you have to remember that those Maharajas were kings in their own right and very wealthy, mostly from raping the resources of their own people. But that wasn't how the British set it up. They were there already when the British turned up. Those Maharajas were very wealthy, and they were giving their allegiance to the British throne by consent. Do you think they'd have felt that they were getting their money's worth out of the British government if Lady Curzon had turned up in a summer frock and a straw hat? No, she had to outshine them in order to have their respect. They expected that. They wouldn't have expected any less. It wasn't only that the British vice regents, the viceroy, Curzon was a viceroy, which means he is there in place of the monarch. It's not only that the viceroy had to outshine the Maharajas would have felt themselves dishonoured if they didn't. So that peacock dress there was important. And not only was it important as a piece of show, as a matter of fact, Lady Curzon was trying to get British people interested in Indian embroidery. And indeed she did. There was a general interest in Indian handcrafts because of the way the Curzons, who took their responsibilities as viceroys of India very seriously. The Indian industries benefited from this in Europe. Remember, the dress was commissioned from Indian embroiderers. It was sent to Paris for Worth to style into a dress. And according to this woman, it's possible. I mean, she's not reliable, but it is true that she said that it's possible that the material itself, the chiffon, could have been woven in Lancashire and then shipped out of Indian cotton and then shipped back to India for the embroidery. Well, it could have been. The point is, Indian cotton was woven in Lancashire and was exported to India, so there was a two-way trade going on there. So this whole thing about her, her crying, it's complete nonsense. All this hurty stuff coming up. I don't know whether maybe making the dress, okay, let's start from this end. She's a dressmaker. She knew how difficult it was going to be. It turned out to be far more difficult than she expected, which is often the case with projects like that, and perfectly understandable. Either you would have to be mad to start a project like that, or a project like that would drive you mad. I don't know which one it is. Now, I want to, talking about madness, I'm going to show you a photograph of this. I think it's going to be here. Well, whatever. I'm going to show you a photograph of Castle Neuschwanstein, which was, hang on. Oh, here we are. Wikipedia again. Neuschwanstein Castle. And in southern Bavaria. Now, it's a 19th century Romanesque revival palace right on a hill. It must have been a pig to build, getting the stuff up that mountain. And it was commissioned by King Ludwig of Bavaria, who is known as Mad Ludwig of Bavaria. And because he was doing mad castles all over the place. And he spent a lot of the state's money making these fantastical castles. I want to tell you about Schloss Neuschwanstein. You know, the only thing about King Ludwig that I object to is he put his castles in places you can't pronounce the names of. Anyway, after a while, the respectable burghers who had to pay taxes to finance Ludwig's mad architectural dreams, they got rid of him. They couldn't stand him anymore. And he ended up sort of incarcerated and declared mad and also dead. He drowned, except he drowned in the same way that Jeffrey Epstein committed suicide. Enough said about that. All right. So they didn't like Mad Ludwig and they got rid of him because he spent all their money on these fantastic castles. Now, you know that castle. You've seen it before, haven't you? You've seen it in hundreds of pictures, and even Walt Disney used it as the basis for the Walt Disney logo, fairy castle thing, didn't he? How many of those respectable burghers do you remember? Not one. I rest my case. All right, so this woman gets all hurty and heartbroken and, oh, it was terrible, and the racism, you just trot out the word racism. The racism and the terrible thing of it, and how people had to work their fingers to the bone, as if this never happened anywhere else in the world but the British Empire. Lady, if you're watching this, wipe your tears enough to pay attention to this. This is a little clip from a programme about a rubbish dump in Ghana.
This is Agbabloshi, a suburb of Accra, the capital of Ghana. But local residents have given it a nickname, Sodom and Gomorrah. It's the home of the biggest electronic waste dump and is a livelihood for many. First it feeds them, then it kills them. This is one of the most polluted areas with toxins and toxic metals on the African continent.
This one be copies.
Emmanuel Akandirike has spent his entire childhood at the dump site. He's never been to school, so he can't go elsewhere. For him, this job is the only way to sustain himself.
14 years. Say, you will prune and papa demba. No cook massy. Cook mass no jam one and bar and baby. No catcham say, me jumana a yaka crowd your back.
The computer you made that hurty, heartfelt video on will end up probably in that rubbish dump where children pick through the circuit boards for heavy metals and things they can use and resell for pennies. If you want to get hurty, you get hurty about that because you are responsible for that. Right, well, that's my Peacock dress video. If you want to donate or contact, the information will be rolling over the Graniopteryx as I speak. Please like, subscribe and share because it does help with the algorithm. If you visit my channel on YouTube and one day discover that I've disappeared without warning, you'll still find me on BitChute or Minds. Just go to either of those platforms and do a search for Graniopteryx. If you're already watching this on BitChute or Minds, good for you. Meanwhile, if you're watching this on YouTube, remember that you must keep checking the subscribe and bell icons because occasionally they reset. Till next time.